Hello and welcome to ToddTalk, where insight meets inspiration. I'm your host, Todd Hiller, and I'm an author, speaker, and longtime community leader, here to guide you on a journey towards fulfillment and balance. In every episode, we'll explore ways to fill life's emptiness, helping you uncover practical tools to create harmony, purpose, and happiness. Whether it's thriving in your career, nurturing personal growth, or simply finding joy in the everyday, ToddTalk is your space for real conversations and actionable advice. So let's thrive together, personally, professionally, and beyond. This is ToddTalk, and I'm thrilled to have you here.
Hello and welcome to another episode of ToddTalk. Thank you so much for being here, and please don't forget to like and subscribe along the way. Today we're going to talk about change and about what letting go looks like and about how to embrace change for what it is, for a new beginning and for a chance to grow, rather than look at it as something that is ending and something you need to worry about and something that you are upset over. I think a lot of us, maybe most of us, struggle with change on one level or another. Some people don't like change of routine. Some people don't like to change coffee shops. Some people don't like to have to change their route to work. And then there's bigger change. Some people don't like to change their friends or where they live or the things that they're used to and the things that feel most comfortable. And I understand that. And there's a lot to be said about liking your routine and understanding your regular things. And I am a creature of habit. I like my habits very much. I like getting up in the morning and having my coffee. I like feeding my birds and watching them. I like watching the sun come up. I like all those things. And when that gets disrupted, obviously there's a little bit of frustration that comes along with it. But one thing I want to encourage you to look at when it comes to change is how much you can move forward from where you are without having to look back and worry that something good or something that you liked is gone. It may not be gone. It may just look different. And even if it is gone, there's ways to embrace that and to be okay with that. So we're going to talk about all of those things. I think the first thing we can talk about is at the surface level, change is difficult because we as people are creatures of habit and we like knowing what to expect. Most of us don't like the unknown. We don't like not knowing what's coming. We don't like surprises, unless it's a birthday surprise, in which case, okay. But some people don't even like that. Some people get really off kilter when things aren't expected and planned. And that's not a bad thing. It's just something that some of us like, and we like to know what to expect. And I think that when our basic routine gets disrupted, we look at it from a place of frustration and maybe a little bit of annoyance that what we wanted to do and what we have come to expect and what we know is coming next and what helps us feel normal and regular, when that gets disrupted, we get kind of angry. We get frustrated because we feel like we're not normal and our morning has been disrupted or our evening or afternoon or whatever time of day. When our change or when our routine gets disrupted, we feel like it's an unwelcome change that we didn't want and we didn't invite, and it brings us to just kind of a negative place. I think one of the most important things we can do to get away from that is to realize that it's not forever. One minor change to our morning routine doesn't mean that it's never going to go back to normal. We can take it in stride and we can kind of improvise, adapt, and overcome and be okay with that and figure out ways to move forward. Take a deep breath and kind of reset and say, hey, yes, I know that usually I do this thing this morning, but plans changed and I'm not going to do that. We have to do something else, or I have to, do kids miss the bus, so I have to drive them to school, or there's a lot of traffic on the way to work, so I'm going to be late and I'm going to miss my first morning meeting and I have to reschedule it. Whatever it happens to be, we can overcome it. We can adapt to it and we can kind of work towards it and find a solution in that moment. And I think that's really good to remember about those little things and those little changes is that it's not forever. It's not permanent. It's one disruption to the day. I have said for a long time that I really, really like the quote and the idea that every day may not be a good day, but there is good in every day. And obviously those little changes and hiccups along the way are things we kind of see as not so good. But we can also rewind and say that, okay, even though that one little thing didn't go so great today, the rest of the day has been okay. And sometimes the rest of the day can even be great. So on the surface level with those minor changes, please remember to take them in stride. And even though they're difficult, they're not long lasting. They're not forever. We can go back to our normal routine tomorrow, back to our regularly scheduled program and all that kind of stuff. Now, there is a bigger change that can happen when big things change. And that's even harder to get through. Sometimes when things change or when we lose a person or we lose a part of our life that we really enjoyed and we really, really wish it didn't have to go away, but sometimes it's necessary to go away. Sometimes we have to physically move where we live. Sometimes we lose people to death, and loss is surrounded by grief that way. Sometimes we lose people because they moved away, or they move out of our lives, or they get a different job and have to relocate, or we don't see them anymore. And that's really difficult. And it's not that minor change that we just talked about. It's not those little things, those little hiccups throughout the day. This is a big change, a big ending, and it feels so heavy to carry, and it feels so heavy to walk through that we say, I'm never going to be able to get through this. I don't know what I'm going to do. This change is forever, and I have no idea how I'm going to move forward. And that's, quite frankly, an okay way to feel. It's okay to sit with your emotions and to sit with those big feelings and look at them and turn them around and flip them over and kind of sit with them and let yourself feel them, because pushing them away doesn't do you any good. Just pretending it didn't happen or pretending you don't feel that way won't solve anything. So sit with them for a minute, feel them, think about them, let them into your life. But don't let them stay there any longer than they have to. Don't let yourself stay there any longer than you need to. Learn that you can pick up and move on and go forward with the change, because the last thing we want to do as people is get stuck and stay stagnant in this place of sitting with these really heavy and really difficult feelings and never walk through them and never get anywhere, and just kind of staying stuck, because that's not a good place to be either. And I think that when these big things happen and when these big changes come about, our first reaction is, it may be like the 7 stages of death and dying, I've always called it DABDA: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Sorry, 5 stages, not 7. And, I think sometimes when big changes happen in our lives, we go through a little bit of that, because it is a loss. Even though it's not the 5 stages of death and dying, it's the 5 stages of loss or grief or letting go of something big that we liked a whole lot. And the first thing we do is we say, well, that's not really going to happen. And then we can kind of hope that, it won't. And then we get angry and we get frustrated. Why does this have to happen? Why this big change? Why does my best friend have to move? Why did this person have to pass away? Why do I have to change jobs? Why did I get fired? Why did I get laid off? Why are my kids choosing to go to college across the country? And then we meet that with a certain degree of, anger. We get upset and we get angry and we kind of get growly and perturbed and ticked off, and with something we wish didn't happen, and we kind of kick the dirt and say, forget it, and then we go through the rest of the stages too. We say, maybe they'll stay, and we kind of bargain with ourselves, and then we get really upset, and then finally we get to acceptance. And the acceptance part of it is difficult to get to, but when it comes to these big changes, the one thing I'd like to encourage you to hang on to, and how to help you get through those big changes, is to remember. Well, we'll use an analogy from a TV show first, and then we'll talk about a life event. So think back to a TV show or TV series you really liked, whether it was when you were a kid or an adult, some Netflix binge-worthy series that you watched. I was thinking about this morning. There's a couple series that I have really, really enjoyed and really liked, and looking back this morning, I thought, I have absolutely no idea how it ended and what the ending looked like. I remember it did end. I remember I watched the final episode. But if you ask me the details, I don't remember. All I remember is that I liked the show. I remember why I liked it, and I kind of carried that with me of my opinion of the show. And I think, and I know the TV show analogy is a little bit light, but if you look at the big changes in your life that have happened, and this is not to say that they're as trivial as a TV show. Please do not misunderstand me. But if you look at the big changes and the big events that have happened in your life, I think a lot of us, we know that they have happened. And now, if it's been a year, 2 years, 10 years, 5 years, looking back on the event, what we remember is how it made us feel and what we liked or didn't like about the event or the changes. We remember fondly the good things that we liked about the whatever it was, whether it was the person or the circumstance or the job or the best friend or the whatever, we remember the loved one, the family member. We remember those good things and remember how difficult it was to get through it when that big change happened. But if you try to look back and think about the details, sometimes we don't remember what exactly it was that made us feel like it was impossible. We look back and say, well, gosh, yeah, that was hard in the moment, but it's been 5 years and my life didn't end, and I've been able to pick up and move on, and I found ways to deal with what happened and to deal with that change. And I think one of the things we can do as people is to remember that difficult is okay. Yes, it sucks. Difficult things are hard. Losing a loved one is hard. Having someone move out of your life is hard. Losing a job is hard. It's difficult on so many levels and for so many reasons. But if you look back at the difficult things you have walked through and you have been through, you have gotten through all of them, and you're still here. And yes, they are so difficult in the moment, but you are strong enough to get through them. I promise that you are. You have so much strength to get through those things. And I think sometimes when it comes to change also, if we look back on that, there are some cases where we say, gosh, I was worried about that for no reason. And sometimes we look back and say, I am so glad that that happened. Now, this typically, obviously, isn't the case with the death of a loved one or, losing a friend or a really close family member. But when it comes to those big events, I think sometimes we get to that point in our lives and we see them and we look right at them and we get really scared and upset and angry and frustrated because this big change is looming and it's huge. But I do think also that sometimes when we walk through them and we get to the other side, we get through the storm, we get through the dust cloud, the blizzard is over, the dust has settled, the wind has died down, and we look back, we come out stronger people on the other side. We come out with lessons about ourselves as people and about how we deal with things like grief and anger and frustration and change. And sometimes I think we're very glad that things changed. And I want you also to remember that it's okay to be glad that something changed. There's a lot of stigma, I think, that surrounds when big changes happen. Sometimes people apologize for who they're becoming or for leaving other people behind. And we've looked at this so far from the standpoint of the one being faced with the change or of losing someone or having someone move away or losing a job. That big change has been something we've been staring at. But remember also that on the other side of the coin, when you need to change, when you need to make things different, when you need to get to a better place, that is something that is okay to do, especially if it's in your own best interest. If you are at a point in your life where you say, if something doesn't change, I'm going to scream or I'm going to implode, it's time to make some kind of change. And for some people in your life, including yourself, it will be a really big change sometimes. It'll be huge. You will let go of something big. You will walk away from something big. You will embrace a new opportunity and leave people and places and jobs and friends and circumstances behind. But when that happens, please remember that you should not apologize for becoming a new person and for leaving certain things behind. Changing for yourself and changing of your own accord and of your own free will to get yourself to a better place is something you should be really proud of, because we just talked about how difficult change is. We just talked about how hard it is, right? Change is so difficult for lots of reasons on lots of levels. Loss is hard, and that brings about a big life change, and we get that and understand it, and sometimes it's difficult to digest. But remember, please remember, that as difficult as it is, sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes it teaches us things that we absolutely needed to learn, and sometimes it teaches other people things that they needed to learn about us. One of the things I've heard in my life that I like a lot is what you allow will continue, and also people will treat you the way you allow them to treat you. And those two things resonate with me a lot, because we as people kind of roll ourselves around a lot and are pretty hard on ourselves when it comes to us walking away from things that leave other people faced with those big changes. And yes, sometimes it's difficult. And yes, sometimes it's really difficult, but so often it's so necessary. So don't approach it or don't look at it from a place of being upset or trying to apologize because you needed to make a change. Yes, change will be difficult, but change is possible and change is necessary. And it's perfectly reasonable to think that you will come out okay on the other side. I think faced with new things that are the product of change, faced with new things, we get really nervous and apprehensive sometimes. And I think that's another thing that makes change difficult, is that we have this expectation, or we have this worry, and we have this anticipation that the new thing is going to be so difficult, or so much more difficult and so hard and so unknown, that we don't think we can do it. We don't want to do it. And that keeps us from walking towards that change. And it works both ways. If it's a change that we are faced with and something that's happening in our lives, I think we look at the fast forward version. We say, it's going to be so difficult once this changes. I can't do this. I can't make it. I won't be okay. And also, if we are the ones making the change, we also say that new thing that's coming, that thing we're going to change because we need it to happen, and that's our new goal, and that's where we want to get to, that's also an unknown, and it's hard, and it's scary, and it's difficult, and I don't think it's going to be okay. But the good news is it will be okay. It will be okay. You can walk through so many difficult things in your life, and if you need proof of that, take a look at all the things you've already walked through in your life. I know every person listening right now has walked through big changes and loss and grief, and you're still here, and you're still walking forward, and you're still going on, and you're still walking through this day after day, and you've overcome big, giant things. And we as people have the ability to overcome big, giant things. We have the ability to not only walk through a change that we are faced with, but also to facilitate change that we need to happen in our lives in order for ourselves to grow. And no matter which way you're approaching it, whether you're walking towards the change or you're walking away from the change, so to speak, you can do it. I know you can do it. I have faith, and I believe that you can do it. You know, there's that old saying, don't look in the rearview mirror. You're not going that way anyway. But I think that one thing you can do is at least glance in the rearview mirror. We're obviously not going backwards. The goal is to keep moving forwards. But take a quick look in the mirror and realize that you have come through and survived and lived through and pushed through so many big things and so many challenging things. And that's a beautiful part of what makes you who you are. A lot of times we think, I wish I could erase this, or I wish I could erase my mistakes, or I wish I could erase these changes. And the really difficult part about that is if you erase your changes and you erase your mistakes, you will start erasing who you are, and you will start erasing how you got to be the person you are. And that's not something we want to do. We want to stay, and we want to keep growing and keep moving forward. And everything that we are is a product of all that we've been through and all that we've lived through and all that we've survived. And that's a really beautiful thing. It's a wonderful example of human resiliency and resistance and human ability to move on and be okay, even when faced with difficult things. So no matter which direction you are approaching change from, if you are the one standing at the edge and looking at the big change right in front of you and wondering, how the heck am I going to get through this? Things will be so different. Or if you are the person standing just over the edge and saying it's time to walk down this new path because I need to change and things need to go differently in my life, no matter which way you approach it from, remember that you can get through it. You just have to remember that you can start things and you can work through things. There is no time limit. There is no stopwatch. There is no clock to get through the change and the feelings and the emotions. That's another stigma I think we kind of wrap around ourselves is, oh, I should be over this by now. No, you shouldn't. No, you shouldn't. I think we as people, we don't ever get over anything. I think we get through it and we learn to walk out the other side of it as the people who have learned the lesson or undergone the change or come out of the cocoon better on the other side. You don't need to get over something and just pretend it didn't happen or have no emotion about it. Of course we have emotion about it. We're people. Big things have happened to me in my life that I still have feelings about, and if I go back there to that place and think about them in depth, it brings back lots of emotion. And that's okay, and that means we didn't get over it and pretend it never happens. That means we got through it, and we came out better on the other side. So look at change the same way. Yes, it can be daunting. Yes, it can be daunting to have to face this big change that's coming up and to start a new chapter. And yes, it can be daunting to choose to start a new chapter and walk towards this new version of yourself or this new part of your life. But both are necessary sometimes, and I promise both are possible. If you know me, or if you've listened, or you follow me on social media, you know that one of my favorite things to say is to give yourself permission to do things, because I think we rob ourselves of that a lot. So in this case, give yourself permission to change. And more than that, give yourself permission to understand that no matter how difficult change may be, sometimes it is so beautiful and so necessary on the other side. Sometimes it's exactly what we needed. And again, don't apologize for that change if you are the one who is facilitating it or undergoing it. Yes, you'll leave people behind. Yes, things will be different. Yes, things are going to have to change. But that doesn't mean your life is over, and it doesn't mean your life is getting worse. It just means that you are walking to a place that you want to be more than you want to be in the place you are right now. And that's really beautiful and a really great thing to strive for as a person. If you don't change and you want to, if you stare right at it and say, boy, I wish I could do this, and you don't do it, you will be faced with regret. And we're going to do a whole episode on regret. It might be the next one in line, actually, since we're going to kind of wrap up here with this. But there is far more regret in the things you don't do and the chances you don't take than there is in the things you do. Yes, we can regret choices we've made. Yes, we can say we wish we didn't do this, or date this person, or buy this piece of clothing, or buy this car, or take this trip, or whatever it is. But when it comes to big feelings of regret, you will find there's so much of that wrapped up in the things you don't do, and the chances you don't take, and the paths you don't walk down, even though you're staring right at them wondering, God, I wouldn't wonder what it would be like if I just took that first step. How beautiful would it be? How cool could it be? I wonder all the great things that might happen. Should I do it? And then you don't do it. That type of regret of not taking chances and not working towards the thing you want to work towards will eat at you forever. So think about that when you think about change. And sometimes, even if it's a change we are faced with, even if it's a really big emotion and a really big thing, even when something as heavy and as serious as the loss of another person, of a loved one, of someone in your family, I know firsthand how awful it can be to lose someone close to you, how difficult it can be, how you feel like you will never be okay. And that's obviously not a change we want to facilitate and that we want to make, but there still is a lesson wrapped in there. And when you come out the other side and look back on it, you will be able to see more clearly what lesson that taught you. And it will bring you to a place where you have changed yourself as a person. So even if the change is something you have to get through, so to speak, if it's a loss or if it's a big change that happens, quote unquote, to you, once you get through it and once you've walked through it, when you look back on yourself, you will realize how much you have changed as a person also. And that's a really beautiful thing to look at. And I encourage you all to do that. When you have gotten through something big and heavy, I don't want you to sit with it and dwell on it. I want you to walk through it and carry it and work through it and then put it down when you're ready. But once you have put it down, once you've set it down and you no longer are carrying that weight, I want you to look back and don't focus on what happened, don't dwell on it, but focus on how much you changed and focus on your ability to get through difficult things and give yourself some credit for that. Give yourself some, a pat on the back and a little round of applause for getting through something so difficult, because it is no small feat to work through something like a big life change, or like a loss of a person, or like an entire moving across country, or the loss of a friend, or being fired from a job, whatever it is. It's a huge deal to deal with that and to work through it. And it's a great accomplishment, not only to work through it, but it's an even better accomplishment when you look back at the person you have become and how far you have walked through that change. So be proud of yourself for that. Work through that and walk through that, and really give yourself some credit for how much ability you have to get through those difficult things. Change may be very difficult, but sometimes change is necessary. And when it comes to those things that change, even if we don't understand the lesson sometimes, I think there is a lot of beauty in understanding that we as people can get through things and come out different and better and more resilient, and sometimes even happier on the other side. There's that age-old phrase that sometimes what didn't work out really worked out. And I think in some instances, change is like that also. We approach it with this apprehension of, things are never going to be the same because of this big change. But sometimes things not being the same is exactly what we need. It is exactly what we need sometimes. So walk forward with that, embrace it, take a really good look at yourself in the mirror. Tell yourself how proud you are of yourself. And whatever you do, give yourself a whole bunch of credit for all the things you've gone through and come out better on the other side. Thank you so much for listening today and for hanging out. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Never forget you are beautiful, resilient, and you have talents deep down inside you that you haven't even uncovered yet. Give yourself permission to do the things you love. Give yourself permission to do the things that bring you joy and put a smile on your face. And whatever you do, never apologize for being you. Thanks very much. Thanks for tuning in to Todd Talk. If you've liked what you've heard, please go ahead and subscribe and follow along so you don't miss any updates or new episodes. Thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your day.